So I thought instead of doing a formal sermon this morning, I'd do a little, kind of learn some text together. And the text is based on the Torah portion that we didn't read, the portion of Bilam, whose donkey saw what the prophet couldn't see for himself. And eventually the prophet does look out over the tents of Israel, and he gives us this wonderful blessing. How lovely are your dwellings, Jacob, your sanctuaries, people of Israel. And so the title of my talk this morning is Prayer Book 101. And I gave it that name because, as you can see from the handout, this prayer is found on page 101 of our prayer books. And it's the 101 is the very first thing we do in the morning service. And since our service here in this Friedman Levitt Sanctuary doesn't start at the beginning of the service, we don't really do it. But you can, every time you enter the sanctuary, if you would like to, and after we're done looking at this, maybe you will, whenever you come into the sanctuary, you can say this prayer as you enter. It's a good entrance prayer, as we'll see. So let's take a look at this prayer. I've numbered them, the verses 1 through 5. They're each verses from the Bible. The first one is, of course, from the Torah portion this morning, from the book of Numbers. How goodly are your dwellings, Jacob, your sanctuaries, people of Israel. For this purpose, the rabbi said dwellings, beitecha, ohalecha, actually, your tents, O Jacob. They said tents or houses are houses of study. This is kind of, you have to put on your rabbi hat. That's the way they interpret it. They meant houses of study. So we also do studying in a synagogue. And then your sanctuaries, mishkenotecha, they said are synagogues, originally the temple. So in the word mishkenotecha is the word Shekhinah, which is the name for God's presence in our midst, and Shechunah, which means neighborhood. It means to dwell. And the idea is that the dwelling place for God is originally the temple, but when the temple was destroyed, we then have synagogues all over the world that we consider particular dwelling places for God. So that's how the rabbis understood Mishkenotecha Yisrael, not the dwellings of the Israelites, but the dwelling place for God. Okay, so then let's take a look at the next verse. As for me, through your great kindness, I enter your house. In awe of you, I bow toward your holy sanctuary. So as you can see from the second page of the handout, I've given you the sources from where they come. This one comes from Psalm 5. And I put in boldface type in each case the actual verse that appears in the prayer, and then some verses around it to give you some context that maybe that'll help us understand what the verse is trying to tell us. The third one is Adonai, I love your house, the place where your glory dwells. Number 4, I will bow and prostrate myself and kneel before Adonai, my creator. Number 5, my prayers are to you, Adonai, in the hope that this is a favorable time. God, in your abundant love, respond to me with your faithful deliverance. So imagine that you are entering the temple in Jerusalem instead of our synagogue. Most of us, after we've been here 5, 6, 7, 150 times, we kind of get used to this place. But imagine those people who've been to Israel, you've gone to the place where the Temple Mount is, and you've climbed up those steps on the southern wall. You go in through a tunnel, come up on top of the Temple Mount, and there you are in this enormous palatial space where this was the place where we feel God's presence the most. For those of you who haven't gone up, most Jews don't go up to the top anymore. That's now a Muslim holy site. We go to the western wall, which is down below on the western side. And people who go to the Western Wall often feel this awesome experience of being in God's presence. So that's kind of the experience that you would get when you go to the temple. Now imagine that you have that experience here in the sanctuary, in our sanctuary right here in Friedman Levitt. And as you walk into the door, you are transported spiritually into a different realm. Sort of like it's a lot of different metaphors you could use. Dorothy walking into the Wizard of Oz palace, right? And sort of being in awe of the great, powerful, mighty Oz, except now it's the great, mighty, powerful creator of the entire universe. Or you could say you're stepping into a Star Trek transporter room, and transporting yourself into God's presence, right? So imagine any of these kind of metaphors where you are transporting yourself into God's presence. And as you walk into this place where you feel God's presence, what do you say? What do you say? And in the ancient times, when you walked into a king's courtroom, you had to come in with some kind of an introduction, right? Some kind of announcement. And so we chose to use this prayer that was given to us by a non-Jewish prophet, Bilam, how lovely are your dwellings, Jacob, your sanctuary is Israel. And then a series of quotes from the Psalms about coming into God's sanctuary. And we come into God's sanctuary a little bit worried. We're not perfect human beings. We feel our frailty and our mistakes, and we want to be perfect. The Psalm says, who can enter your holy place? Only someone with a pure heart. Many people don't feel like they have a pure heart. How can you come into God's presence anyway? Well, it's because, as the Psalms say over and over again, because of God's great kindness. As for me, with your great kindness, I enter your house. Even though I'm not a perfect person, I feel your kindness, and I feel like I've given permission to enter into your presence. I'm still in awe of you, and I bow to you, and some people on that word actually bow towards the ark in the front of the synagogue, and I bow to your holy sanctuary. And then I love your house, the place where your glory dwells. You want to kind of feel this kind of love. Remember, the prayer that comes right before the Shema is the one that says Ahavat Olam, or Ahava Rabbah, about God's great love for us. And we're supposed to, in return, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, we should love God. And so now, loving God, we love God's house, the place where his glory dwells. We feel God's love in our lives. Again, these series of verbs, I bow and prostrate and kneel before you. We don't actually do that anymore, except on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when we prostrate ourselves. But most of the rest of the year, we just do a bow when we enter. My prayers are to you, Adonai, in the hope that this is a favorable time. We say this on the festivals when we do the Torah service. Va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, aneni be'emet yeshecha. We sing that 3 times before the open ark on the festivals. And so my prayer is that our prayers will come at a favorable time, and again, with your abundant love, you will respond to me with forgiveness, deliverance, salvation. There's a story, of course, that we all know about Jacob running away from home. First time he's away from home, he falls asleep and he has a dream. He's worried. He's never left home before, and now he's out in the wilderness with lions and tigers and bears, and it's hard for him to sleep. And when he falls asleep, he dreams that he sees God's ladder going up to heaven and the angels going up and down, and he sees God, and God says to him, everything's going to be okay, Jacob. And when he wakes up in the morning, he says, wow, I had no idea. I just thought I was sleeping out in the wilderness somewhere. This place is a holy place. This place right here, this is the gateway to the heavens. And there's one tradition that says, it was just any old place. It was the place he happened to rest. But once he had this experience, for him, it was a gateway to the heavens. And similarly, when we come into the gateways to our sanctuary, this becomes a gateway to an experience with God. And so as we enter the synagogues today, we remind ourselves of this beautiful prayer from the non-Jewish prophet who was forced to give us this blessing, and we give thanks to God for being allowed to pray and to enter into God's presence. So just a little bit of a teaching here. If you want to, you can read the second half of the page there. I gave you the context for it. I was going to go through it, but that would take more time. But you can read the context of each of the prayers and see how they add a little extra flavor to the verses that are quoted in this prayer that's reconstituted. Something that our ancestors did frequently. They would take verses and phrases from different parts of the Bible and reconstitute them like a mosaic into a new picture. And so that's the picture they created for us as we come into the synagogue to pray. Any questions? I feel like since I'm teaching, I have to ask questions. No questions? Okay. I must have explained it really well.